What will you do as a parent if your young child, who is barely 2 years and 11 months old, comes back from her nursery school only to inform you that her teacher or one of her teachers, whom you have entrusted with the responsibility of looking after her and protecting her while at school, was repeatedly taking her to his office, the toilet, or an unused room at the school to defile her by having sexual intercourse with her? Would you simply dismiss this as the senseless gibberish of a young child who doesn't understand what she is saying? Or take your child out from that school and simply walk away from the stress and public scrutiny and uncertainty of litigation that could arise from leveling such an accusation against that teacher? Or better still, would you believe your daughter and get up and fight in search of justice for both your daughter and other kids that could potentially end up in similar situation? Hello everyone, and welcome back to Lawyer's Case Files. My name is Joy Phillips. On this episode, let's talk about the 3 major scandals of Chrisland School, Lagos, Nigeria, that so far made it to national news ever since the school was established in 1977. The very first scandal of Chrisland Schools that made it to national news and our collective consciousness as netizens was not this.
What? What happened to her? Why would my child fall? She hasn't done anything strenuous. No ambulance, no doctor, no nurse, no medical personnel, nobody. There was no emergency provision on ground in a place where you have over 500 students.
No, it was not the cry of this mother in this video, pleading and asking Chrisland Schools to explain to her what happened to her daughter, whom she described as being hale and hearty, when she left the house that morning to attend Chrisland School's sporting event at Ikeja Stadium, which unfortunately ended in every mother's worst nightmare. Chrisland School's first major scandal happened way back in November of 2016, and it involved 47-year-old adegboyega adenekan, a former management staff of Chrisland Schools and the supervisor of the primary school section of Chrisland Schools, Victoria Garden City, Lekki, Lagos, who was accused of sexually defiling a 2-year, 11-month-old pupil of Chrisland School, who was at the time in kindergarten grade 2. For the sake of convenience in this story, we will simply refer to Mr. Adegboyega Adenekan as Mr. Adenekan, or the supervisor in this case. According to the mother of the young child, sometime in 2016, after reading a book on the need to give sexual education to young children, she called her child to the bathroom and told her not to allow anybody to touch her wee-wee, which is another way of telling her not to allow anyone to touch her private part. The mother said that to her greatest surprise and shock, her daughter told her that Mr. Adenekan, the supervisor, touches her wee-wee. That means that Mr. Adenekan touches her private part. On further probe by the mother, the child said that Mr. Adenekan usually takes her out of class and shows her some videos that were sexually stimulating. Armed with this revelation from the child, the mother immediately reported this matter to the Chrisland School authorities and subsequently took her child to a clinical psychologist for evaluation. Ms. Olive Ogedembe, a clinical psychologist with Fredlich Consulting, was the one who evaluated the young child and her mother in this case and later testified as the second prosecution witness. For the sake of convenience, we will simply refer to Ms. Ogedembe as the psychologist throughout this report. In her testimony before the Ikeja Sexual Offences and Domestic Violence Court on January 29, 2018, the psychologist stated that in the process of her psychological evaluation of the child, she specifically asked the young child, "Who touches your private part?" To which the child answered, "Mr. Adenekan does," repeatedly. She told the court that she later gave the child an assessment sheet and asked her to draw anyone that comes to her mind. And at this point, the child became restless and started shouting, "Mr. Adenekan, Mr. Adenekan," and continued shouting even before drawing anything yet. The psychologist went on to tell the court that the child revealed that Mr. Adenekan said that it is good for a child to put her wee-wee inside Mr. Adenekan's wee-wee. In other words, it's good for a child to put her private part into Mr. Adenekan's private part. She said that when asked to draw Mr. Adenekan's wee-wee or private part, the 2-year-old child was able to draw a picture of what resembled a male reproductive organ in the form of penis. In other words, the child was able to draw Mr. Adenekan's private part. The psychologist told the court that when asked to identify her own wee-wee, the child pointed to her private part. Asked if she was the only one, the child answered that the supervisor takes her and her friend, name of her friend withheld, out of the class. And asked to show what Mr. Adenekan does to her friend, the child said he kisses her bum bum, demonstrating her words with a puppet. The psychologist told the court that from her observation and assessment, based on the drawing and other psychological evaluations, the child showed signs of inappropriate sexual behavior, fear, and sleeping problems. She told the court that these were all consistent with psychological research on symptoms of child sexual abuse. This Chrisland School's kindergarten child in question, who was now 4 years old at the time of this trial, was also called before the court and testified as prosecution witness in the trial of this supervisor. When asked directly in her testimony what Mr. Adenekan does with her friend, she replied, "Mr. Adenekan says, 'Your bum is sweet. I will lick your bum.'" On further cross-examination, the 4-year-old, in her own words, told the court, "I did not like what he did. He put his hands in my wee-wee. He put his mouth in my wee-wee. And he put his wee-wee in my wee-wee." Wee-wee here referring to private parts. And he, in this case, obviously referring to Mr. Adenekan, the supervisor. On its part, Chrisland Schools called a total of 5 witnesses in defense of the supervisor and the school, including the head teacher of the nursery section of Chrisland Schools, Victoria Garden City VGC, where this incident happened. All 5 witnesses testified in defense of the supervisor, telling the court that they know him personally and that there was no way he would have committed the child defilement for which he was being charged with. But in the end, Justice Waka of the Sexual Offences and Domestic Violence Court, Ikeja, believed the testimony of the 4-year-old and the other prosecution witnesses over that of the defense, and therefore convicted the supervisor for the offense of child defilement as he was charged. She also sentenced him to a total of 60 years imprisonment. Delivering this judgment, Justice Waka stated that Mr. Adenekan, the supervisor, abused the trust of the kids in his care and that of their parents. He further described him as being wicked, conscienceless, and an animal not fit to walk the streets. Dissatisfied with this judgment, Chrisland Schools and the supervisor went to the Court of Appeal to reverse both the conviction and the sentencing. However, a three-man panel led by Justice Mohammed Gaba unanimously dismissed his appeal, affirming both his conviction and sentencing. It is also worthy to mention here that when asked during trial if the psychologist has contacted the other child, the second victim that was mentioned, that was also abused in this case by the supervisor, she answered yes, that she contacted the mother of the other child that was mentioned to have been abused by the supervisor, but that her mother said no, she was not willing to get involved in this case due to the stigma and public attention that may result from it. So this brings us to the end of today's episode on the very first scandal of Chrisland Schools that made national news. I hope you learned something. Thank you very much for watching to the end, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and as usual, don't forget to drop your comments and opinions in the comment section below. Share this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't, and definitely I will see you in part 2. Bye for now.